competitive intelligence as an industry is continuously evolving what it does, how it does it, and most importantly, demonstrating why it's critical for organizations to leverage now more than ever. Today we discuss this evolution and the future of competitive insight generation with Marc Limacher, whose career in CI spans over 3 decades. Thank you, Marc, for joining us today on this discussion. Really happy to have you here.
Thanks for inviting to your show. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, and so I think, many people probably know who you are if they've been in the industry as long as you. But for those that don't, it'd be important for us to better understand your background and how you came to CI and the first days of INOVIS, if that's okay.
Sure, by all means, happy to talk about it. So a rather unusual and unorthodox background as a CI firm founder. After doing the MBA in San Francisco, I joined a major institutional money management firm, investment firm there. And our charter in the group that I was in was to provide early intelligence, early insights to go to non-Wall Street sources, to really be able to detect trends, signals, red flags of potential new opportunities within the equities across about 12 industries, what to buy, hold, or sell. That was really our charter. So the whole idea was very much the same as it is for all of our CI practitioners that we have as clients, to anticipate before Wall Street these early signals and then capitalize on them by make your early moves investment-wise. So then the idea popped up that, hey, let's convert this cost center into a profit center by offering that same methodology with our global network of back then 150 journalists or reporters, we called them, to also to non-investment clients in the Bay Area, in Silicon Valley. That's where we were located. So that was my charter, to go out there, spread the gospel about the beauty of CI to the Apples, the Genentechs, the HPs of the world. And they all loved it. And that gave me the ideas, wow, this is obviously a latent demand that has been under-addressed all these years. And I'm talking now about late 80s and early 90s. And that's basically the idea then, the famous, big bullet point, catchphrase idea, let's start something. That was really the idea. And what I did back then was negotiate a gentleman's agreement with the firm, the investment firm, by saying, hey, can I just take 2 industries with our clients with me and start the business? In mainly the high tech one, which is very cyclical, and the other one, the pharmaceutical life sciences one, which is very solid, which is your life insurance, because it's very steady. So luckily enough, they agreed, and that's when we started, with my wife and I in 1992. And yeah, it's almost 30 years since then.
Wow. And so 30 years ago, you're starting competitive intelligence, and there must have been a big difference in the way competitive intelligence was done, because my world of competitive intelligence relies, number one, on www. Right, the internet. But back then things must have been different. Is that fair to say?
Rather, yes. It was actually before the .com world even existed. Can you believe it? Gives you an idea how old I must be, right? But yes, it was all before Netscape came on board, for those of you who remember that company. So it was all based really on public information. Do your secondary. There wasn't a whole bunch yet, of course, in terms of out there online. It didn't simply exist. And as you all know, it has changed dramatically since then. I mean, now we have overload of information. Everybody has access to the same information all the time, anywhere in the world. So we live in perfectly efficient markets in that sense. But what that means really is you got to go the extra mile. Similar to what we did at this investment firm, by going to all these sources, the primary sources that are simply not in the public domain. And that's the genuine intelligence piece that we have been specializing in all these years. Go to sources that you cultivate over time as your informant network globally, that feed you intelligence pieces well before you can actually pick it up on the internet or through other public channels. And that has been our mantra really since then. And it's still a unique thing. As we can see, it's a very difficult industry to enter from a primary CI point of view. There are lots of secondary vendors, which is a commodity by now. it's really the primary angle that's still the one where you can differentiate yourself.
So if you look back at when you started and the types of questions that were being asked then versus now, is there a difference there, or is it still a similarity in the types of questions? Obviously, you've got IT telco and you've got pharma, so technically there's going to be differences there. But were the concerns and the pressures different then?
Funny enough, overall they have pretty much stayed the same. I mean, people want to know, what should we be worried about? Why should we not sleep at night? What's coming down the pipeline from our competitors? So, and the differences are the same between those two industries we specialize in. I should say three, because in addition to life sciences and IT, we also now focus on where they converge, which is digital medicine, genomics, and e-health, m-health. But in a nutshell, it's about building scenarios in terms of where to put your resources in anticipation of upcoming trends, opportunities, or threats, in a nutshell. And that hasn't changed at all. What has changed is the velocity of market, the velocity of change, not just in the IT space with extremely short product life cycles, which is the reason why those companies in that industry mainly focus on tactical intelligence, help us push out those boxes before the next upgrade is due or before another disruptor comes in, versus the pharma world where we have extremely long life cycles and exclusivity arrangements for your products or drugs. So it's a very different mindset. But again, this hasn't really changed since the late 80s, 90s. How we do our work, yes, that has changed, of course.
Yeah, and maybe just going back a gear to the primary intelligence piece. So from my understanding and experience, that hasn't changed. People talk to people, people speak with people. But what I have noticed is that awareness of competitive intelligence as an activity has become greater. And so have you experienced the difference in the availability to connect from when you started to where we are now?
Absolutely. There is a much, much greater concern to protect privacy and to be more aware, as you mentioned. When you get an unsolicited call for information, people in general have become more aware. There is a red flag to their professionally trained PR group to authenticate the caller and so forth. But that once again underlines the importance of cultivating your informant networks over time, much like a journalist cultivates his or her sources over the years. And that, to me, that's the golden nugget of a successful CI firm. But in order to do this, you have to have low staff turnover, because it takes a while to cultivate these relationships, which will not work if you have a lot of turnover, or if you want to be a generalist to do everything under the sun. So being a specialist, like we have been following this model, as you know, since 92, really comes in very handy in that regard, that you have a source network that you can cultivate over the years with your loyal analysts. And I'm grateful, super grateful, that we have this in our company. An average turnover of, my gosh, average tenure has been 16, 17 years, believe it or not, of most people. So that's a huge reason for our success over the years.
Yeah. And I suppose you hit an important point around cultivation. Like, clearly, INOVIS and others will follow ethical legal guidelines to remain absolutely legal and crystal clear in the activities that they do. But I suppose you need to have an understanding of what you're talking about with your sources to maintain that connection. I suppose there's a difference between being given a question and having a conversation. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely. You want to have someone that breaks the ice, where the respondent realizes right away, wow, I'm talking to one of my peers. He or she knows all there is to know, not just knows the jargon, but the latest trends and developments. Absolutely. That's bottom line important, because it's not obviously survey work. You engage people in a professional, lengthy, peer-to-peer expert discussion. And as such, you cultivate this give and take relationship so that you also know what he or she is interested in. So you send them information that's, of course, ethical and legal, that interests them. So that opens the door for this ongoing dialogue, from which our clients then, of course, benefit when you do analysis and intelligence collection.
And you also touched on this as well, around the secondary information being a commodity. And I suppose it's well known that people subscribe to and receive huge amounts of information, competitive information, But one of the things that we've been saying is competitive information is not competitive insight. So how
Yeah.
have you seen things change in terms of that an analytical activity that goes on top of secondary information? Have you seen an evolution in that, and what clients or partners expect from service vendors and partners like us?
Absolutely. So, as you said, yes, there is an overflow, an overwhelming amount of intelligence or information that comes in. The missing link oftentimes is the interpretation of such intelligence by experts. And clients see us more as their in-house partners, their virtual partners, in that we help them make sense of this overwhelming amount of information and intelligence, not just by us actually getting the primary piece to this intelligence, but then also adds the so what, the implications piece, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
And the now what piece, what do we do next? You can, of course, go a step further, play it out in simulation workshops, strategy planning workshops, bring it to life to cross-functional teams with specific action plans for the next session, right? Oftentimes we see ourselves being engaged quarterly by clients who want to have these interactive workshops cross-functionally from senior management all the way to the field sales force to make sure that they are, keep peaking at the breast of their competition, maximizing messaging, go-to-market strategies, sales motion, you name it. So this is a huge stake, and it's much more engagement that's being viewed by clients as partners. It's not the vendor-client relationship. It's really the partnering that we see ourselves as consultants to our clients.
Yeah, and I suppose taking it back again, how you said around the tenure of the people performing the research and analytical activities, I suppose it's also about putting that information into context with historical or recent activities, and really putting things into perspective, which makes
Yes.
a big impact when you've got new findings that are emerging. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely fair to say. I mean, in fact, we have, as you know, we have many clients that ask us, hey, we have another tracking need for the next 12, 24 months, but we can only do it. We have the same team that we had the past 5 years. So is Mary and John and Don still on the team? If so, let's go for it, right? So
Right.
it underlines this importance of a comfort level relationship building, showing expertise in a given therapy area or technology field, and adding this piece to the top, not just getting the intel, but tell me now what this means. What should we do next, right? How should
Yeah.
we even present it to management? Can you help us do this? So all of this is crucial and super crucial, important, more than ever.
If we think about the activities that take place in competitive intelligence type of work that INOVIS engages in, it's clear that it's about finding information on the competitors and putting it into context, and doing something with that information.
Yeah.
There's obviously a list of questions. People talk about kits and kicks, a list of priorities. But in terms of processes or ways of working, are there certain activities either on the IT telco or pharma side that are hot right now or of real interest when it comes to generating competitive insight?
Definitely. And again, they differ quite a bit between those two industries, given that IT has a much faster life cycle in terms of product stages and so forth. So just let's stick to IT for now, or
Yeah.
even e-health and m-health or medical devices. One example is win-loss. That's a big one. Because given the short life cycle, they want to learn as much as they can from any lost opportunity. Why did we lose? And usually the reps say only, oh, it's price. But of course, we all know it's much more than that. It could be anything from the story behind it, the technology vision, the sales motion, the messaging, and so forth. And for that, you got to go deep and talk to these accounts in depth. So that's something we have seen a huge uptick with, even during COVID, where, of course, the roles of reps have changed as well. It's all virtual now, certainly. You don't have this comfort of face-to-face. So especially if you sell an intangible product like a service, it's even more crucial that you are differentiating yourself and figure out, well, did we not get this potential opportunity? So win-loss, you could learn a tremendous amount, both from wins and losses, to then modify and optimize your go-to-market strategy, your sales motion, messaging, and so forth. That's a biggie. And in the same spirit, there is the other element of pre-sales intelligence, where we have also seen a tremendous uptake, especially in the IT world, where folks, before they approach a prospect, they want to know as much as possible about that prospect. So getting good intelligence on budgets, decision-making cycles, who is engaged in those, what are legacy systems installed at the moment, and so forth, is also a good example of where you get an instant ROI, because you give your sales reps battle cards, sell against guides, messaging against feeds, and so forth. So it's very tangible, it's measurable, and it has high impact. While on the pharma side, it's your classic, still virtual conference coverage. Give me the max on the latest and greatest developments from our competitors and so forth. Things we should be basically concerned about in the next few years.
If we just go back to the pre-sales competitive support, playing devil's advocate, one would say your sales teams or customer-facing teams should know everything about these prospects. Why would we need another firm to help support us with that? What would you say to that?
I would say to that an outside firm can go deeper and give you even more specific guidance to basically clarify the opportunity, put it into numeric terms, right? Who are the players? Who are the decision makers, the gatekeepers, the purchasing managers who hold the purse strings in the end? And also even budgets or currently installed legacy systems, things that if you talk to these companies as the vendor, as the company who wants to sell something, they don't necessarily want to reveal that information, right? So getting basically an optimized level of knowledge before approaching a new opportunity ups the chances of closing the deal and win the new client relationship. So it has tremendous value. And again, you can measure it. If you need to demonstrate ROI to management, it's quantifiable. And that's a luxury. As you know, in CI, it's hard to quantify oftentimes the ROI. And here you can.
And so, given the long tenure that you and INOVIS have had in the competitive intelligence world, where do you see things going in the next 5-10 years? I know we've got the backdrop of COVID-19 and the disruptions, but generally speaking, there has been a change, or has it been very constant in terms of the demands and the activities that are put forward for this kind of working relationship?
In terms of the changing roles over the next 5, even 8 years, as I said earlier, I think that the role of CI providers has grown into one of being partners. Clients, bigger companies, they look at us more as almost virtual in-house teams, right? That they want to co-define next steps, recommendations. So let's play out what we learned in a workshop, scenario, wargaming, you name it. We have seen a tremendous uptick of that. Even virtually, we have done now best practices in how to implement workshops, as you know, since you are running those for us. So it's something we have seen a nice uptick during virtual times as well. And I think if you are a secondary data provider, that's a must. You got to have these as your backdrop. That's your foundation as a client company, right? Everybody has access to that information. And there are some tremendous providers of these services. What's really needed more and more is making sense of this overwhelming mountain of intelligence, information, and data, and bring all that to the next level, making sense out of it, be actionable, and gather intelligence to give as much lead time as possible to the client. I go back to my original point, how we got started. It's the analogy to the investment world, I think, totally applies. The more intel you have before you buy, hold, or sell an equity, the more likely it is that you make the right decisions. And that's ultimately our goal, to help our clients really make those right decisions early on before their competitors have access to that same intelligence, so that you are the company who shapes the future and doesn't have to react to it by someone else shaping it. In the end, that's really the goal.
That's very powerful thing to say there. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Marc, for your time today. Obviously, if anyone wants to reach out, you've got your LinkedIn and the website for INOVIS, which we'll show in the next clip. But for today, just want to thank you for your time and your insights on this Insights call.
My pleasure. Anytime. And if there are questions, you know where to reach me.
Absolutely. All right. Well, have a good day, Marc.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you.
Bye, Josh.
Thanks for joining us on another Competitive Insight series video, where we hope we've provided you an opportunity to hear from a range of industry thought leaders and partners on topics related to competitive strategy. As ever, you can reach out to us directly through our website at inovis.global, where you'll find more resources, tools and case studies on competitive intelligence and strategic consulting. Thanks for watching.